The fluorescent lights in my home office buzzed like angry wasps as I stared at the bank statement on my computer screen. 3 months of unexplained charges, each one a small dagger twisting deeper into my gut. Daniel Mallory, certified public accountant for 15 years, reduced to playing detective in his own marriage. "Danny, you still working in there?" Marta's voice drifted through the door, sweet as poisoned honey. My wife of 18 years, the woman who used to bring me coffee during late-night tax season marathons, now sounded like she was reading lines from a script. "Just finishing up the quarterly reports," I called back, minimizing the browser window. The lies came easier these days. We'd both gotten good at them. I heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floor toward the kitchen. Designer heels, I noticed. When had she started wearing designer anything? The Marta I married wore sensible flats and complained about spending $40 on shoes. Now she strutted around in footwear that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie Russo, my old boxing coach. "Gym's open late tonight if you need to hit something legal." Eddie knew. Hell, everyone in this Rust Belt town of Millbrook probably knew except me. The cuckolded husband is always the last to figure it out, isn't he? Like some cosmic joke where everyone gets the punchline, but the guy paying for the setup. I pulled up Marta's credit card statement again, the one she thought I couldn't access. Lakeside AirBnB rentals, expensive restaurant charges, lingerie purchases from boutiques I'd never heard of. The pattern was clearer than my tax code expertise. My wife was having an affair, and I was funding it. The front door slammed. Through the window, I watched Marta climb into her Honda Civic, the same car she'd driven for 8 years. At least she hadn't upgraded that yet. Small mercies. I grabbed my jacket and keys. Time for some reconnaissance. The drive to Millbrook Lake took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that had seen better decades. Abandoned storefronts lined Main Street like broken teeth, casualties of the economic downturn that never quite turned back up. This town had a way of chewing people up and spitting out their bones. The Airbnb sat on a wooded lot overlooking the murky water. Marta's Honda was parked beside a silver Audi that screamed midlife crisis. I pulled into the shadows of a defunct gas station across the road and waited. Through the cabin's picture window, I could see them. Marta, my wife, the mother of my 2 children, pressed against the chest of a man I recognized from her office Christmas parties. Corbin Finlor, the creative director with the expensive haircut and the habit of talking about himself in third person. They were laughing about something. Marta threw her head back, that genuine laugh I hadn't heard in months. The laugh she used to save for my terrible jokes about depreciation schedules and tax loopholes. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Not for any grand plan, just evidence that this moment was real. That the woman I'd built a life with was building a different life with someone else. Corbin's hands moved to Marta's waist, and I'd seen enough. I started the engine, but something made me pause. A figure emerged from behind the Audi, a young woman with bleached hair and clothes that cost more than my monthly car payment. She knocked on the cabin door, and I watched the panic spread across Marta's face through the window. Corbin answered, and the blonde pushed past him into the room. Even from across the road, I could see the argument erupting. This was getting interesting. I stayed hidden and watched the drama unfold. The blonde, who had to be Corbin's girlfriend, was waving her arms and pointing at Marta. Corbin looked like a man caught between 2 tornadoes, which, given the circumstances, was probably accurate. After 10 minutes of what looked like World War III in miniature, the blonde stormed out and drove away in a red Mustang. Marta followed 5 minutes later, her face flushed with either anger or embarrassment. Corbin stood in the doorway, running his hands through that perfect hair. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd bitten off more than he could chew. I waited until he went back inside, then drove across the road. His Audi sat there like a silver monument to poor life choices. I pulled out my pocket knife and considered my options. The smart thing would be to drive home, confront Marta like a civilized adult, and work through this like mature people. The smart thing would be to preserve whatever dignity remained in our marriage. Instead, I punctured all 4 tires and left a note under his windshield wiper. "Enjoy the ride, homewrecker. Next time, try dating someone who isn't married." As I walked back to my car, a security guard rounded the corner with a flashlight. "Hey, what are you doing over there?" I broke into a run, crashing through the underbrush like a middle-aged fugitive. Branches tore at my jacket and my lungs burned with the effort. Behind me, the guard's flashlight beam swept back and forth through the trees. I made it to my car and drove off with my headlights off until I reached the main road. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. When had I become the kind of man who vandalized cars and ran from security guards? When my wife decided to redecorate our marriage without consulting me, that's when. My phone rang as I pulled into our driveway. Marta's name lit up the screen. "Where are you?" Her voice carried that edge I'd been hearing more often lately. "I know you're not at the gym." "Just finished up some errands," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Why?" "No reason. I'll be home soon. We need to talk." The line went quiet, and I sat in my car staring at our house. 18 years of mortgage payments, family dinners, Christmas mornings, and bedtime stories. Now it felt like a stage set waiting for the final act of a play I never auditioned for. I thought about Eddie's offer to hit something legal. Maybe later. Right now, I had some financial records to organize. If Marta wanted to play games, she'd learn that accountants keep very detailed score. The front porch light cast long shadows across our yard, shadows that seemed to be pointing toward something darker ahead. I'd always prided myself on seeing problems coming, on having contingency plans for every scenario. But I'd never planned for this. Marta came home 45 minutes later with takeout Chinese food and an expression that belonged in a poker tournament. We ate in silence at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals and made countless plans for a future that apparently no longer included both of us. "How was your day?" she asked, stabbing her low mane with unnecessary force. "Productive," I said. "Closed the Henderson account, reviewed the Morrison audit. You know, the usual excitement of tax preparation." She nodded like she was listening, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. Probably calculating how much of our assets she could claim in a divorce. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it sparked something cold and calculating in my chest. "What about you? How's the campaign for Morrison Industries coming along?" Marta's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. "Fine. Corbin has some interesting ideas for the spring rollout." There it was. His name dropped into our conversation, like a stone into still water, sending ripples through everything we pretended was normal. "Corbin seems like a creative guy," I said. "Very hands-on from what I hear." Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, searching for hidden meaning. Good. Let her wonder what I knew. "He's professional," she said carefully. "We work well together." "I'm sure you do." After dinner, I retreated to my office, while Marta disappeared into our bedroom with her laptop. Through the thin walls, I could hear the soft chime of text messages arriving every few minutes. Each sound felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I spent the next 3 hours doing what I do best, following the money trail. Joint accounts, credit cards, investment portfolios. I mapped every financial thread that connected our lives. If this was heading where I thought it was heading, I needed to understand exactly what I was working with. The picture that emerged wasn't pretty. Marta had been systematically moving money into accounts I couldn't access, claiming it was for emergency savings. Emergency savings that funded lakeside retreats and expensive dinners for 2. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Diner. Come alone. A friend." I stared at the message for a long time. In movies, Mysterious texts led to dramatic confrontations or dangerous revelations. In real life, they usually led to disappointment and wasted time, but these weren't usual circumstances. I deleted the message and closed my laptop. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, I had a marriage to pretend was still intact. Marta was already asleep when I came to bed, or at least pretending to be. She'd positioned herself on the far edge of the mattress, as close to falling off as possible without actually leaving the bed. The message was clear. Don't touch, don't talk, don't acknowledge that we used to be people who loved each other. I lay there listening to her breathe and wondering when we'd become strangers sharing a mortgage. The next morning brought the usual routine with a layer of tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Marta left for work early, claiming an important meeting. I waited 30 minutes, then drove to the Riverside Diner. The place looked like it had been decorated in 1987 and left to marinate in grease and broken dreams. Red vinyl booths, checkered linoleum, and a waitress who looked like she'd been there since the grand opening. I ordered coffee and waited. At exactly 2 p.m., the blonde from the lakeside cabin walked through the door. She spotted me immediately and slid into the booth across from me, with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. "You must be Daniel," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Ayla Findler. I think we have some mutual interests to discuss." Findler. Same last name as Corbin. This was getting more complicated by the minute. Such as? Such as the fact that your wife is screwing my boyfriend and we're both getting played. Ayla Findler was the kind of woman who probably got whatever she wanted through a combination of looks, attitude, and strategic tears. Mid-20s, dressed like she shopped exclusively in magazines, and carrying herself with the entitlement of someone who'd never been told no. "I'm listening," I said. "Corbin thinks he's being clever, juggling both of us. Your wife thinks she's found her ticket to a better life, but here's what they don't know. I've been documenting everything." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of photos and text messages. Corbin and Marta at restaurants, holding hands in parking lots, entering and leaving the lakeside cabin. The evidence was damning and thorough. "What do you want?" I asked. "Justice," she said, her eyes glittering with something that wasn't quite sane. "And money. Lots of money." "From who?" "From you, obviously. You're going to support me and Corbin until he finds a better job. Consider it compensation for the emotional damage your wife has caused." I almost laughed. Almost. "You want me to pay you because my wife is cheating on me with your boyfriend?" "That's exactly what I want. And if you don't agree, these photos end up everywhere. Your neighbors, your clients, your kids' social media feeds. Everyone will know what kind of man you are." "What kind of man is that?" "The kind who can't keep his wife satisfied." The coffee in my stomach turned acidic. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about humiliation, control, and a level of manipulation I hadn't thought possible outside of soap operas. "How much?" I asked. $2,000 a month, until Corbin gets established in a better position." "And if I refuse?" Ayla's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Then everyone in this pathetic little town learns that Daniel Mallory's wife prefers younger, more successful men. Your reputation, your business, your family, all of it becomes a joke." She stood up, leaving a 20 on the table. "You have 48 hours to decide. My number's in your phone now. Don't make me wait too long." I watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown timer. Through the diner window, I could see her climb into the red Mustang and drive off, probably heading back to plan the next phase of whatever scheme she'd cooked up. The waitress refilled my coffee without being asked. "Rough day, honey?" "Getting rougher by the minute," I said. I sat there for another hour, thinking through my options. I could pay Ayla's extortion demands and hope she'd eventually go away. I could call her bluff and let her release the photos, dealing with the social fallout as it came. I could confront Marta directly and try to salvage whatever remained of our marriage. Or I could do what I did best, follow the paper trail and see where it led. I pulled out my phone and called Eddie Russo. Eddie's gym, this is Eddie. It's Dan. You still offering that late-night session? Always. You sound like you need it. More than you know. I'll be there in an hour. Bring hand wraps. This sounds like a heavy bag kind of conversation. I left the diner and drove home through streets that looked different somehow, like I was seeing them through new eyes. The houses seemed smaller, the sky grayer, the whole town more fragile than I'd remembered. Our house sat quiet and empty, waiting for the evening's performance of domestic normalcy. I went to my office and started making copies of everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, insurance policies, investment records. If this was going to be a war, I'd fight it with the weapons I knew best. Numbers don't lie. People do, but numbers tell the truth every time. I was about to learn just how much truth I could handle. Eddie's gym occupied the bottom floor of a converted warehouse on the wrong side of Millbrook's already questionable tracks. The place smelled like sweat, leather, and decades of broken dreams, but it was honest about what it was. No pretense, no false advertising, just a room full of equipment and the promise that if you hit things hard enough, you might feel better afterward. Eddie Russo had been teaching people to fight for 30 years, first as a Golden Gloves trainer, then as a coach for anyone willing to pay $20 a month for the privilege of getting their face rearranged. He was 55, built like a fire hydrant, and possessed the kind of street wisdom that came from watching people reveal their true selves under pressure. "You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes," he said when I walked through the door. "More like someone pissed on my entire life." I told him about Marta, Corbin, and Ayla while I wrapped my hands. Eddie listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding like he'd heard variations of this story before. "So the girlfriend wants you to pay for the privilege of being cheated on?" he said when I finished. "That's the general idea. And you're considering it?" "I'm considering my options." Eddie held the heavy bag steady while I threw combinations, each punch carrying months of frustration and betrayal. Left jab, right cross, left hook. The rhythm was meditative, almost therapeutic. "You know what your problem is, Danny? I'm sure you're going to tell me. You're thinking like an accountant instead of thinking like a fighter." I paused mid-combination. "Meaning?" "Meaning accountants try to balance the books, make everything add up neat and clean. Fighters look for weaknesses and exploit them." "What weaknesses?" Eddie grinned, showing teeth that had survived more fights than they should have. "Think about it. This Ayla girl, she's trying to shake you down for money, but what's she really telling you?" I thought about it while throwing another combination. That she's desperate? That she's broke. If she had real leverage, she wouldn't need your money. She'd just destroy you and move on. But she needs cash, which means she's in a weak position. So you turn the tables. Instead of playing defense, you go on offense. I stopped hitting the bag. "How?" "Same way you'd handle a client who was trying to cheat on their taxes. You document everything, find the irregularities, and present a case they can't argue with." Eddie was right. I'd been thinking like a victim instead of thinking like someone who spent his professional life catching people in lies and forcing them to face consequences. "I need to know more about Ayla and Corbin," I said. "Now you're talking. What's the plan?" "Research first, then action. If they want to play games, they'll learn that I'm very good with rules." I left the gym feeling clearer than I had in weeks. The physical exertion had burned away some of the emotional fog, leaving behind something colder and more focused. At home, I found Marta in the kitchen, preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner. Candles, wine, the good china we usually saved for holidays. She'd changed into a dress I didn't recognize, something that probably cost more than our monthly utility bill. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "Do I need an occasion to cook for my husband?" The word husband sounded strange in her mouth, like she was speaking a foreign language she'd recently learned. Of course not. It smells wonderful. We ate dinner like actors playing the roles of a happily married couple. Marta asked about my day, I asked about hers, and we both pretended the conversation was genuine instead of a carefully choreographed dance around the truth. I might need to travel more for work, she said over dessert. The Morrison campaign is expanding into new markets. How much travel? A few days a month, maybe a week at a time. I nodded, like this was perfectly reasonable news, instead of confirmation that she was planning to spend more time with Corbin. Whatever you need to do, I said. I know how important your career is to you. Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or surprise that I was being so accommodating. After dinner, while Marta was in the shower, I used her laptop to access her email account. The password was still our wedding anniversary, which felt like either irony or insult, depending on how you looked at it. The email trail was extensive and damning. Months of correspondence with Corbin, starting professional and gradually becoming personal, then intimate, then explicit. Plans for weekend getaways, discussions of a future together, even conversations about how to handle the Daniel problem. But the most interesting emails were the recent ones between Marta and someone named Kincaid, her boss at the advertising agency. They were discussing my financial assets, my client list, and something called transition planning. I screenshot everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud account, then cleared the browser history. If Marta was planning to transition away from our marriage, she'd discover that transitions worked both ways. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the county courthouse. Public records were a beautiful thing when you knew how to read them, and I spent 3 hours learning everything I could about Ayla Finlor and Corbin Finlor. They weren't married, despite sharing a last name. They weren't even legally domestic partners. Ayla had filed for bankruptcy 2 years earlier and still owed money to 3 different credit card companies. Corbin had been fired from his previous job for inappropriate workplace conduct and had a civil judgment against him for unpaid rent. They were exactly what they appeared to be, grifters looking for an easy mark. I also discovered something interesting about the lakeside cabin. It was rented under Ayla's name, but the lease agreement specifically prohibited subletting or additional occupants without written permission from the landlord. By having Marta and Corbin use the property for their affairs, Ayla was violating her lease terms. That gave me leverage. I drove to the cabin and knocked on the door. Ayla answered wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. "Daniel, what a surprise! Have you made your decision?" "I have," I said. "But first, I think you should know that you're in violation of your lease agreement. Unauthorized occupants, subletting without permission. Your landlord would be very interested in this information." Her confident smile wavered slightly. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you're one phone call away from eviction. I'm also talking about Corbin's employment history and your bankruptcy filing. Should I continue?" "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken at the courthouse. "Public records don't bluff, Ayla. They just tell the truth." She stepped back, her face cycling through several emotions before settling on anger. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that extortion works both ways. You can release those photos of my wife and your boyfriend, but I can also release information about your financial situation, your lease violations, and Corbin's history of inappropriate workplace behavior. How do you think that will play in a town like Millbrook?" "You wouldn't. Try me." We stared at each other for a long moment, 2 people who'd stumbled into a game neither of us had planned to play. "So, what now?" she asked. "Now you have a choice. You can drop this ridiculous extortion scheme and disappear from my life, or you can escalate things and discover exactly how thorough an accountant can be when he's properly motivated. And if I choose option 3, what's option 3? I take you to court anyway, claim you owe me support for emotional damages or some other creative legal theory." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I smiled, and apparently it wasn't a pleasant expression because Ayla took another step backward. Please do, I said. I'd love to explain to a judge how you think I owe you money because my wife is cheating on me with your boyfriend. I'm sure that will go exactly how you're imagining. I left her standing in the doorway and drove home, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: control. But control was just the beginning. If Marta and her friends wanted to play games with my life, they were about to learn that some games had rules they hadn't considered. And I was very, very good with rules. 2 days later, Ayla made good on her threat. She filed a claim in small claims court, arguing that I owed her support payments for emotional damages and financial hardship caused by the defendant's failure to maintain his marriage. The legal theory was creative, if completely insane. I received the court summons on a Thursday morning while Marta was at work. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday, which gave me exactly 5 days to prepare my defense. I spent those 5 days doing what I did best: building an airtight case. First, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find about Ayla and Corbin's relationship, their financial situations, and their pattern of manipulative behavior. Then I documented every expense related to the lakeside cabin, every unauthorized charge on accounts they'd accessed, and every lease violation they'd committed. But the real weapon in my arsenal was something Ayla hadn't considered. I was a licensed CPA with 15 years of experience in forensic accounting. If she wanted to play legal games involving money, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I also hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former police detective who specialized in domestic cases. Marcus was expensive, but he was thorough, and he had a talent for finding information that people thought they'd hidden. This is either the dumbest extortion attempt I've ever seen or the most desperate, Marcus said after reviewing the case files. Maybe both. What did you find? Ayla Finlor has tried this before. Different city, different mark, same basic scheme. She finds men going through relationship problems and tries to shake them down for money. Usually works because guys are too embarrassed to fight back. Usually. Last time, she picked a divorce attorney. That didn't end well for her. Marcus handed me a thick folder of documents. Everything you need to bury her in court. Financial records, criminal history, witness statements from her previous targets. This woman is a professional victim. I spent the weekend reviewing Marcus's findings and preparing my presentation. By Monday night, I had a case that would make Ayla wish she'd never heard my name. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold, typical weather for a typical day in Millbrook's courthouse. The building was one of those 1960s concrete monuments to bureaucratic efficiency, all sharp angles and no character. Ayla arrived wearing what I assumed was her poor victim outfit: conservative dress, minimal makeup, an expression of wounded innocence. Corbin sat beside her in a cheap suit, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I wore my best business suit and carried a briefcase full of evidence. If this was going to be a performance, I intended to look the part. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Coleman, known for her no-nonsense approach to small claims cases. She'd been handling disputes in Millbrook for 20 years, and her reputation suggested she didn't suffer fools gladly. "Ms. Finler," Judge Coleman said, "please explain to the court why you believe Mr. Mallory owes you money." Ayla launched into a rehearsed speech about emotional damages, financial dependence, and implied obligations. She claimed that my failure to maintain my marriage had caused her boyfriend to lose his job, which had created financial hardship that I was responsible for addressing. It was creative fiction, delivered with enough tears to seem genuine. When she finished, Judge Coleman turned to me. "Mr. Mallory, how do you respond to these claims?" I stood up and opened my briefcase. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Ms. Finler is engaged in a pattern of fraudulent behavior designed to extort money from vulnerable individuals. I handed the judge a copy of Marcus's investigation, along with my own financial analysis of Ayla's claims. The evidence shows that Ms. Findler has filed similar claims against at least 3 other men in the past 5 years, using identical legal theories and similar emotional manipulation tactics. In each case, she targeted men going through relationship difficulties and attempted to extract money through frivolous lawsuits. Judge Coleman reviewed the documents with the expression of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity. Furthermore, I continued, Ms. Findler is currently in violation of her lease agreement by allowing unauthorized occupants to use her rented property. She owes approximately $4,000 in unpaid utilities and fees related to this violation. Rather than owing her money, she actually owes money to her landlord and the utility companies. I presented copies of the lease agreement, utility bills, and violation notices. Finally, Your Honor, I'd like to address Ms. Findler's claim that I'm responsible for her boyfriend's employment difficulties. Mr. Corbin Findler was terminated from his previous position for inappropriate workplace conduct, specifically for engaging in personal relationships that violated company policy. This pattern of behavior appears to be continuing in his current employment. I handed Judge Coleman a copy of Corbin's employment history and the documentation of his affair with my wife. In summary, Your Honor, Ms. Findler is asking this court to order me to pay her money because my wife is having an affair with her boyfriend. Not only is this legally absurd, but it's also part of a deliberate pattern of predatory behavior designed to exploit men during vulnerable periods of their lives. Judge Coleman spent several minutes reviewing the evidence. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning and Ayla's increasingly panicked breathing. Ms. Findler, the judge said finally, is there anything in this evidence that you'd like to dispute? Ayla looked like a deer caught in headlights. Your Honor, that is, some of those documents might be accurate, Judge Coleman suggested, because they appear to be public records and official documentation. I don't think Mr. Mallory understands the emotional trauma I've suffered. Ms. Findler, this is a court of law, not a therapy session. You've presented no legal basis for your claims, and the evidence suggests that you're engaged in a pattern of frivolous litigation designed to extort money from vulnerable individuals. Judge Coleman closed the file and looked directly at Ayla. Your claim is dismissed. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to pay Mr. Mallory's court costs and legal fees. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney's office for review of potential fraud charges. She turned to me. Mr. Mallory, please submit an itemized list of your expenses related to this case. The court will ensure you're compensated for the time and money you've spent defending against this frivolous action. Ayla's face went through several shades of red before settling on a color that suggested internal bleeding. This isn't over, she hissed as we left the courtroom. Yes, it is, I said, unless you'd like me to file a harassment complaint to go along with the fraud charges. She and Corbin hurried away, probably to figure out how they were going to pay the court-ordered damages. I walked to my car, feeling lighter than I had in months. But the real satisfaction came that evening, when I got home to find Marta waiting in the kitchen with a bottle of wine and an expression that suggested she'd heard about the court proceedings. We need to talk, she said. I agree, I replied. We absolutely do. The final act was about to begin, and for the first time in months, I was looking forward to the performance. Marta poured 2 glasses of wine with the careful precision of someone buying time to organize their thoughts. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, trying to project casual normalcy. But her hands shook slightly as she handed me the glass. I heard about what happened in court today, she said. News travels fast in a small town. Daniel, I think there are some things we need to discuss. I sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 18 years of meals, arguments, celebrations, and quiet moments. Now it felt like a conference table where we'd negotiate the terms of our surrender. "I'm listening," I said. Marta took a sip of wine, then another, then set the glass down with the finality of someone making a difficult decision. "I've been seeing Corbin," she said. "I know you know, so there's no point in pretending anymore." The confession hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I'd known it was coming, had evidence of it for weeks, but hearing her say it out loud still felt like a physical blow. "How long?" I asked. 6 months. Maybe 7. "Why?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Why does anyone have an affair, Daniel? Because something was missing. Because I felt invisible in my own life. And Corbin made you feel visible?" "Corbin made me feel like a woman, instead of just a wife and mother and employee. He made me feel like I mattered." I wanted to argue, to point out all the ways I'd tried to show her that she mattered, all the years of support and partnership and shared dreams. But what was the point? If she couldn't see it, explaining wouldn't help. "What do you want to do now?" I asked. "I want a divorce." The words should have devastated me, but instead, they felt like relief. The pretending was over. The performance was finished. We could finally stop acting like people who loved each other. "Okay," I said. She blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. "Okay? I'm not going to fight you on this, Marta. If you want out, then we'll figure out how to do it as cleanly as possible. What about the house? The investments? The retirement accounts? We'll divide everything fairly. I'm not interested in punishing you financially." She stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "You're not angry?" "I'm furious," I said. "But I'm not stupid. Anger doesn't solve practical problems." We spent the next hour discussing logistics like business partners dissolving a company. Who would tell the kids? How we'd handle the mortgage? What would happen to our shared accounts? It was surprisingly civilized for the end of a marriage. "There's something else," Marta said as we finished our wine. "About Corbin and Ayla. What about them?" "They're not really together. I mean, they live together, but it's more of a business arrangement than a relationship." I set down my glass. "What kind of business arrangement?" "The kind where they target couples having problems and try to extract money from the situation. Ayla finds vulnerable men. Corbin seduces their wives. Then they work together to maximize the financial damage." The pieces clicked together in my mind like tumblers in a lock. "You're telling me this whole thing was a setup?" "Not at first. Corbin was genuinely interested in me, and I was genuinely attracted to him. But when he realized you were a CPA with substantial assets, he brought Ayla into the picture." "And you went along with it?" Marta's face flushed red. "I didn't know about the money part until recently. I thought he loved me. But he doesn't. He loves the idea of getting half of everything we've built together." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "How recently did you figure this out?" "Last week. I overheard him talking to someone on the phone about closing the deal and maximizing the payout. When I confronted him, he admitted that the whole relationship was part of a larger plan." "To do what?" "To destroy our marriage, take as much money as possible, and move on to the next target." I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Everything I'd thought I understood about the situation was wrong. Marta wasn't just having an affair, she was the victim of an elaborate con game, which meant I wasn't just a cuckolded husband, I was the primary target of a financial scam. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because despite everything that's happened between us, I don't want to see you destroyed by these people. And because I realized that whatever problems we had in our marriage, they were our problems, not something to be exploited by strangers." "What do you want me to do with this information?" "I want you to protect yourself. And if possible, I want you to make sure they don't do this to anyone else." Marta went to bed early, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a half-empty bottle of wine. I sat in my office, staring at the financial records I'd compiled over the past few weeks, seeing them in a completely different light. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about a carefully orchestrated plan to destroy my life and steal everything I'd worked for. Ayla's court case hadn't been desperate stupidity. It had been a calculated move to establish legal precedent for future claims. If Marta divorced me and Corbin could prove emotional damages from the breakup, they could potentially claim a significant portion of our assets. The lakeside cabin, the expensive dinners, the elaborate gifts, all of it was documentation of a lifestyle they'd argue they were entitled to maintain. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic kind of way. But they'd made one critical error. They'd targeted someone who understood financial manipulation better than they did. I spent the rest of the night planning my response. If Corbin and Ayla wanted to play games involving money and legal manipulation, they were about to discover that I was exceptionally good at both. By morning, I had a plan that would not only protect my assets, but also ensure that they never tried this scheme on anyone else. The game wasn't over. It was just entering the final round, and this time, I was going to win. I spent the next week implementing what I privately called Operation Scorched Earth. The name was dramatic, but the tactics were purely practical. Document everything, protect all assets, and systematically dismantle their ability to continue their con game. Step 1 involved moving all liquid assets into accounts that Marta couldn't access. I'd been slowly doing this for weeks, but now I accelerated the process. Every dollar in our joint accounts got transferred to individual accounts at different banks. I liquidated investments, closed credit lines, and canceled any financial instruments that could be used against me in a divorce proceeding. Step 2 required Marcus Webb's continued services. I needed comprehensive documentation of Corbin and Ayla's pattern of behavior, their financial situations, and their connections to other potential victims. "You're building a case like you're going after organized crime," Marcus said when I outlined my requirements. "Because that's essentially what they are. Organized crime with better marketing." Marcus delivered results that exceeded my expectations. Corbin and Ayla had been running variations of this scam for at least 3 years, targeting a dozen different men across 4 states. They'd stolen an estimated $200,000 through various combinations of extortion, fraudulent lawsuits, and strategic relationship manipulation. But the most interesting discovery was their connection to Marta's boss, Mr. Kincaid. He wasn't just an innocent bystander in this situation. He was an active participant who helped identify potential targets within his company's client base. "Kincaid gets a percentage of whatever they steal," Marcus explained. "He identifies wealthy clients going through relationship problems, then introduces their wives to Corbin through networking events and professional development opportunities." "How many times have they done this?" "At least 6 times that I can document, probably more." I stared at the evidence Marcus had compiled. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about a systematic pattern of predatory behavior that had destroyed multiple families and stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. "What's our next move?" Marcus asked. "We're going to shut them down. Permanently." Step 3 involved careful coordination with law enforcement. I couldn't just walk into the police station and claim that my wife's affair was part of an elaborate financial scam. I needed evidence that would convince prosecutors to take action. Fortunately, I had that evidence. Detective Sarah Morrison was a 15-year veteran of the Millbrook Police Department who specialized in white-collar crime. She was also one of my former clients, which gave me credibility when I requested a meeting. "This is extensive," she said after reviewing Marcus's investigation. "How did you put this together so quickly?" "Professional training and personal motivation," I said. "The question is whether you can use it." "Oh, we can definitely use it. Wire fraud, extortion, conspiracy, identity theft, they've committed enough felonies to put them away for years." "What do you need from me?" "Cooperation, testimony, and patience while we build the formal case." "How long?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. We need to coordinate with other jurisdictions and make sure we get everyone involved. I agreed to cooperate fully, with one condition. I wanted to be present when they made the arrests. Detective Morrison smiled. I think that can be arranged. While law enforcement built their case, I focused on step 4, protecting future victims by exposing the scheme publicly. I contacted the local newspaper, the Better Business Bureau, and several online forums where people discussed relationship problems. I couldn't provide specific details about the ongoing investigation, but I could warn people about the general pattern of behavior to watch for. Predatory individuals who target people going through relationship difficulties, I wrote in one post. They offer emotional support and romantic attention, then gradually introduce financial demands or legal threats. If someone you've recently met starts asking for money or making claims about what you owe them, investigate their background thoroughly before responding. The warnings gained traction quickly. Within days, I was contacted by 3 other men who'd had similar experiences with people matching Corbin and Ayla's descriptions. Their stories helped fill in gaps in Marcus's investigation and provided additional evidence for Detective Morrison's case. Step 5 was the most personally satisfying, watching their scheme collapse in real time. Marta had moved out of our house and into a hotel while we worked out divorce details. She called me on a Tuesday evening sounding panicked. Daniel, something's wrong. Corbin isn't answering his phone and there are people watching the cabin. What kind of people? Police, I think. And maybe FBI. There are cars everywhere. I didn't tell her that I knew exactly what was happening. Have you tried calling Ayla? Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Daniel, I think we're in serious trouble. We're not in trouble, Marta, but Corbin and Ayla definitely are. The arrests happened on a Wednesday morning at exactly 6 a.m. Detective Morrison called me at 5:45 to let me know the operation was beginning. I drove to the lakeside cabin and parked across the road, just like I had the night I first discovered the affair. But this time, I wasn't watching my wife betray our marriage. I was watching justice finally catch up with the people who'd tried to destroy my life. Corbin came out in handcuffs, looking confused and angry. Ayla followed 5 minutes later, screaming about her rights and demanding to call her lawyer. Mr. Kincaid was arrested at his home simultaneously, according to Detective Morrison's text updates. The whole thing took less than 30 minutes. 3 years of systematic fraud and manipulation, ended by a coordinated law enforcement operation that I'd helped orchestrate. Marta called me as I was driving home. They arrested him, she said, her voice hollow with shock. They arrested Corbin and Ayla and Mr. Kincaid. The police say they're part of some kind of organized crime ring. I know, I said. You know? How do you know? Because I'm the one who gave the police the evidence they needed to build their case. Silence on the other end of the line. Marta, are you still there? You planned this, she said quietly. All of it. The court case with Ayla, the financial records, the investigation. You planned all of it. I documented all of it. There's a difference. Why didn't you tell me? Because until last week I wasn't sure whose side you were on. More silence. What happens now? She asked finally. Now we finish our divorce, divide our assets, and try to rebuild our lives separately. The police will probably want to interview you about your relationship with Corbin, but Detective Morrison says you're considered a victim, not a suspect. And us? There is no us anymore, Marta. There hasn't been for months. I'm sorry, she said. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I know you are. And for whatever it's worth, I forgive you. I meant it. The anger had burned away over the past few weeks, replaced by something colder but cleaner. Marta had made terrible choices, but she'd also been manipulated by professionals who specialized in exploiting people's weaknesses. That didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained it. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once the criminal case became public. Marta didn't contest my financial arrangements, and I didn't seek punitive damages for her affair. We split everything down the middle, sold the house, and went our separate ways. Our kids took the news better than expected. Amelia, our 20-year-old daughter, had suspected something was wrong for months. Ross, our 22-year-old son, was more surprised, but handled it with the emotional resilience of someone who'd grown up watching his parents drift apart. "Are you going to be okay, Dad?" Amelia asked when I told her about the divorce. "I'm going to be fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually." And I was. 6 months later, I was living in a smaller house closer to downtown Millbrook, running my accounting practice with renewed focus, and spending my evenings at Eddie's gym teaching basic financial literacy to anyone who wanted to learn. "You seem different," Eddie said one night as we were closing up. "Lighter somehow." "I feel like I finally understand who I am," I said. "For the first time in years, I'm not pretending to be someone else. What's next?" I looked around the gym at the worn equipment and faded motivational posters, at the honest simplicity of a place where people came to work hard and get stronger. Next, I keep building the life I actually want, instead of the life I thought I was supposed to want. Corbin, Ayla, and Kincaid were all convicted on multiple felony charges. Corbin got 5 years in federal prison. Ayla got 3 years. Kincaid got 7 years and was ordered to pay restitution to all their victims. Marta moved to a different city and started over with a new job and a new life. We exchanged Christmas cards and brief updates about the kids, but otherwise maintained the polite distance of people who'd shared a past but had no future together. The whole experience taught me something important about the difference between winning and getting what you want. I'd won the legal battles, protected my assets, and seen justice served against the people who'd tried to destroy me. But more importantly, I'd gotten something I hadn't even realized I wanted: the freedom to be myself without apology or compromise. That was worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. The ledger was balanced, and for the first time in years, the numbers added up exactly the way they should.